Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of the Concussion Nerds podcast. And today we're going to be talking about sound sensitivity. Now, for the clinicians that are listening, we know this is something that plagues so many of our clients. And for the individuals on a healing journey listening, we know this is something that you struggle with fairly often on a concussion healing journey. So we're going to dive in today about both management for hearing sensitivities and hypersensitivity to hearing, as well as what the heck do you do about it? And I'm going to offer some suggestions, some resources, some tools, and a bit of, I guess you could say, a home program you could do as well, and that therapists can start to bring into their clinic to support you in this. So, a few different things we're going to chat about. Before I dive in, this week, we are releasing and opening ticket sales, free and VIP, for our second annual Concussion Nerds Virtual Summit. Oh, so excited. Okay, mark your calendars, September 27th and 28th. And if you attended last year, you know how amazing this conference was. And so I'm just going to share a little bit. It is live and pre-recorded sessions. Okay, this is where we bring clinicians and those on a healing journey together into the same space, because so often we are divided. And there was some beautiful magic that happened last year for both groups when we came together. So we have live and pre-recorded sessions. We have a live performance with Christabel Braden, who's going to kick us off. I'm going to be teaching a couple live workshops. We have pre-recorded workshops on migraine, on nutrition, on mast cell activation syndrome, on POTS, on the upper cervical spine, on gut health and adrenals, on the oculomotor system. It's going to be an amazing weekend. Again, free and VIP tickets available. We will drop the link next week when tickets go on sale, but I want you to mark your calendars because at some point this week, those are going to go on sale. So you can watch my social media, and then next week, below next week's episode, there'll be the link that you can register. Cannot wait. We had 300 people last year, and I'm so stoked to see what happens this year. Okay, sound sensitivity. Oh, so we get asked this question a lot. What do I do to treat my sound sensitivity? And I will be brutally honest. And I think that while we do a good job in our other systems after concussion, I'm going to say we do a really shit job at being able to identify and assess the auditory system. And I'm going to speak for myself on this too. I have some tools that I use in my practice to look at, can we localize sound appropriately and these aspect of things? And I have some flags when I have when I'm querying if someone's having auditory processing disorder issues. But I do think this is an under-serviced area that we need to give more attention to. And so, again, I'm trying to connect with more audiologists in this area to broaden my own skill set in this area, because if every other system is in our brain can be impacted after concussion, explain to me why the auditory system can't be impacted after concussion, right? Our inferior colliculus sits right below our superior colliculus. Auditory information comes through our inferior, visual comes through our superior. They speak together closely, and auditory information, ultimately 60% of it roughly crosses to the contralateral temporal lobe and is processed in our brain. So, of course, the auditory system can be impacted after concussion. And when I was more than 2 years ago now, when I was researching, when I was building the Concussion Nerds curriculum, there were studies that were looking at individuals who had been diagnosed with mild cognitive impairment when the issue was because they had auditory processing disorder. And if they went through the work and they had the support to help the processing disorder, their cognitive issues started to not be present. Now we can understand how, if we can't process the auditory information coming in, how that's going to domino into how we can work cognitively and perform cognitively. Yeah. So I do think that this is an area and a system that needs a little bit more attention in the concussion space, or a lot more attention than it's currently getting. That is my opinion. I've had that opinion for a while. I just haven't been able to do much about it yet. So today, we're going to talk a little bit about sound sensitivity and what do we do about it. So from a management perspective, This is, of course, where we typically say grab your loop earplugs, grab your noise canceling headphones. And if you're going to be in an environment that is got a significant amount of noise, and sound is one of the sensory inputs that can contribute to you feeling overwhelmed, let's utilize our tools, right? Now, like anything, we don't always want you wearing earplugs. Like we don't always want you wearing sunglasses. We need to be able to stimulate the brain in ways that challenge it enough that you can grow and learn without necessarily throwing you into overwhelm all the time, right? So in your home, take out your earplugs. When you're going into a grocery store or a place with multiple sounds from multiple different angles, feel free to wear your filter earplugs, that sort of thing, right? So management is one thing, management isn't treatment. And you guys hear me preach on this a lot on this episode. Now, for many people, what I'm going to say is I don't treat hearing sensitivity or sound sensitivity specifically as its thing very often, but I am going to give you some tools today. And when I think about sound sensitivity and light sensitivity, because they're very commonly presented together, they also kind of fall into that category of someone who's struggling with autonomics. Okay. Now, in my clinic, we use a tool called the Safe and Sound protocol at times, and that's a listening system. It's a type of music therapy that was developed by Dr. Stephen Porges, and it is actually considered an acoustic vagal nerve stimulator. Pretty cool, hey? And when you start to pull up some of the research in this day and age, I always say I love sound healing, right? So when you think of sound healing, and I have a couple different sound healers that I've gone to over the years, but sound healing is this combination of their vocalizing with their voice, typically in a different language, to be honest, and the use of different instruments with different vibrational frequencies and different sounds to facilitate healing. When you look at music, right? And you just think about when you need to get motivated and when you need to smile, when you need to get yourself amped up, there's certain types of music that can usually do that for you. Versus if you feel like you need an emotional release and you really need the dam to break for those tears to fall, there's probably a different type of music that you know will hit that spot for you to help that emotional reaction happen. Right? There's music. So consider this like music or sound-based interventions. And the really cool thing is that this isn't woo anymore, right? Like when people think of sound therapy, like, oh, this is very woo. It's not, because there's more and more research coming out to support the use of sound-based or music-based interventions as a tool in healing, particularly in the mental health space, but also in the physical space, in cognition, in movement, right? It's coming out more and it's really cool. So more listening-based therapies, which is where the SSP protocol fits into, the SSP has filtered levels of music. So let's talk about how this and how sound can link to your autonomic nervous system. Okay. So we have these lovely muscles in our middle ear, and their job is to increase tension and decrease tension, and it filters different frequencies of sound. Okay. That's their job. And then as sound comes in through the ear, it integrates with the brainstem and a bunch of other cranial nerves. Let's just say that. Now, if you're somebody that is living in fight or flight fairly consistently in your life, right? And we know with concussion, that tends to be what can happen. Well, what is the job of our hearing system when we're in fight or flight? You're extra vigilant, right? You hear everything. You can hear, I think of when I was a kid, we always had to walk through this one chunk of patch of woods to get from the main road to our house. It was like the shortest little, it was maybe 200 meters. But it was the woods, and we lived in an area where there was coyotes and there was bears and there was animals and all these things. And I'm a giant chicken, you guys. Like was and still am the biggest chicken. And so we'd walk through this area back to get home, and I would all of a sudden be on high alert. I would hear a twig snap. I'd hear a rustle in the bush. I'm so attuned and so hypersensitive to the sound around me because that keeps me safe. in that environment, when you're walking through the woods and you live in an area with coyotes and bears, that's a normal response. But what happens is if we're living in this place of fight or flight and we're hyper attuned to sound every time, we're not filtering out these different levels of sound. We're hearing everything. So we get this hypersensitive, we get overstimulated to auditory information. Now, when we can start to have that middle ear and those muscles in the eardrum adjust appropriately, they start to filter out different frequencies of sound. And so what you'll commonly hear people say is, as I continued my rehab, my sound sensitivity got better. As we address the reasons why you're living in sympathetic states, and we can use the tools we know to help retrain and shift your nervous system so it is more dynamic in nature and not stuck, the sound sensitivity tends to follow. Pretty cool, right? So really, it's that accurate and discriminatory perception of sound is dependent on the function of those middle ear muscles. And so they will tighten that tympanic membrane and support the perception and attenuation of different frequencies. If you want the sciencey term of what's happening, that is what's happening. And so as we can impact the nervous system and the nerves that stimulate those muscles to adjust that, that will adjust the perception and the attenuation of those frequencies of sound. So that's why, as we address the other factors that are keeping you in fight or flight, and we're able to start to shift you, and you're able to start to shift yourself into a more dynamic state, your hearing sensitivities will tend to follow. Okay, so before I go into even like starting to increase your tolerance to sound and what that looks like, let's just pause for a minute on some of our tools that we know we can use to help our autonomic nervous system. Okay, so if you're someone that can tolerate sound, you could layer in music to that meditation, but the song and the music you're going to choose, really choose something that's going to help you feel grounded and feel calm or bring up those feel good emotions in you. Right? Maybe you are somebody. So sound healing to me is probably like the most calming thing my nervous system can. And not everyone will be able to tolerate it, but it is so calming to my nervous system. And then I can continue to build on that after. Right? In the summit, we have the breath nurse and the healing couple both leading breathwork classes, because it's such a physiological somatic tool that you are in control of that can absolutely shift that nervous system when you find a method that works for you. Getting in nature and just grounding yourself in nature. The research that continues to come up around force bathing and being in nature and being in the natural elements and the positive impact that has on your nervous system, which would thus positively impact your sound sensitivity. Committee, you're seeing what we're learning so much, especially in this concussion world. What you do with your clinicians in the clinic is one piece. It's one piece. And well, that piece that I get to do with you when you come see me or when you work with another concussion nerd around the world or another clinician around the world, while it's an important piece, a hugely important piece for people, there are these other elements that absolutely, if we pull them into play, are going to make the impacts that we have together greater. This is not one thing or nothing, right? So tool number one, when we're talking about how the heck do we address sound sensitivity, is we need to look at the autonomic nervous system, right? And I'm going to lead a really cool workshop in the summit about how you start to understand. And if this word means nothing to you right now, I promise you, don't worry, it will when we're done. But if I'm going to lead a really cool workshop that clinicians you're going to be able to use and individuals on a healing journey are going to be able to use on being able to actually understand and identify your activation pathway. And then we're going to build a toolbox for you that you unpack at these different levels of your activation pathway. It's going to be a great workshop. So sound sensitivity look at the link between autonomic regulation. Okay. Bit number 2, I shared a story. So we had our mini school coaching call. So for those that don't know, mini school is my free community for individuals on a healing journey. We meet twice a month, and then you have a huge library of resources as well. This month's topic was sound sensitivity. And the reason we're doing this podcast episode today is because there was a lot of really great takeaways and a lot of people that were like, I learned a ton of new things here. So I want to talk a little bit more about processing of sound. Hence, not sound sensitivity per se, but I shared a story of I had a client once. And when I stood on his left side, his comprehension, his ability to follow instructions was significantly better than when I stood on his right side. Significantly better. And so that led me to do a quick little test in clinic to look at if he could actually localize where sound was coming from. And so when we did this quick test in the clinic, it became very obvious very quickly that when sound was presented to him on his left side, he knew where it was. But when sound was presented to him from his right side, he had no idea. No idea where it was coming from. Now imagine trying to follow directions when there's this confusion and this uncertainty, even if you could see it, but this confusion and this uncertainty through a system of where that sound is coming from, right? So looking as therapists with our clients, can we do a quick test of let's localize where the auditory information is coming from? And then because that superior and inferior colliculus are so close together and they map, well, this would be a perfect example of when you would layer and stack auditory stimulus with your visual tasks to help remap both the auditory component. There's a little clinical gem for you. So say you're working on your autonomic stuff, which I think everyone that listens to this podcast probably is. You're working with your therapist and you're like, I really want to start to increase my tolerance to sound. Now, again, this isn't something that's like, okay, I want to, and the next day it happens. We're training ourselves, right? So again, there's an option of doing something like the SSP protocol, which is different 5 hours of listening with different levels of filtration to help also bring in that autonomic regulation component. But that's not accessible to everybody. So I know I'm thinking of doing a group program with the SSP. Stay tuned. But I was introduced, and I can't remember where I learned it now, to be honest. I did not develop it. But I was introduced to basically the sound sensitivity pyramid. And if you follow me on social media, I've posted it many times. But basically at the bottom of this pyramid is brown or pink noise. The level up from that is white noise. The level up from that is instrumental. Higher level is lyrical. Highest level is conversational. Okay. Now, let's be very clear that within each of those levels, there's multiple different levels and dynamics as well, right? And so brown noise, pink noise. This could be ocean waves. This could be rain pitter-pattering on a windowsill, right? Some of those sounds are going to really resonate with people and some of those is not. An example of white noise is static. I can't stand that sound, right? When you move up into instrumental, well, there's going to be a difference between the low-pitched cellos and string instruments versus horn instruments versus piano. There's going to be a difference versus a solo guitar or a trio or a quartet versus listening to an orchestra, right? There's different layers and levels and depths of music and sound and frequencies being processed as you get into something more complex like an orchestra. And so the key in any time we do something like this is we find what you need to do. So what you do is you start at the bottom of the pyramid. And so in this case, we're going to say brown noise. And so say you choose ocean waves as your noise and you like that. The goal is to be comfortable in that position, sometimes doing some other form of rhythmic activity bilaterally while you listen to sound can be helpful. Sometimes if you're someone who can just kick back and close your eyes and just enjoy the sound, that's just fine too. The purpose of this is really not to have a dual task. The only reason you would do something rhythmical is if it was going to help you stay grounded, right? Aimlessly doodle, whatever it is. The goal is to listen to that brown noise for 20 minutes. If you can get there, you're not going to get there in the first go. If you can get there in the first go, we move up a level. But the goal is to work up to 20 minutes of that brown or pink noise within that 1 to 2 point symptom increase. Okay. When you can reach that, you move up to the next level, which is white noise. Again, you start over. You might have to start with 30 seconds to 2 minutes. It's a different type and frequency of sound. We're training our auditory system. So then you work yourself up to 20 minutes, and then you move into instrumental. Now in instrumental, I'm going to suggest you start with a less layered piece of music. So I personally would start with strings and things like guitar and cello and that type of piece. Side note, tangent. When I was in Madrid, such a magical moment. When I was in Madrid, was walking back to my hotel from dinner one evening, and it's night, so it's dark, but that city is lit up so gorgeously with the old architecture in the buildings. And on the corner was a string quartet playing music. And I was spellbound. It was, oh my gosh, like the most beautiful experience of like seeing Madrid lit up around them play. Oh my gosh. Anyways, I would personally choose strings. You might choose piano. You're going to start with working up to 20 minutes of that. When we talked about this in mini school yesterday, one of the members suggested that the piano guys is a really beautiful instrumental channel to listen to. 20 minutes of that. When you do 20 minutes of, say, guitar or strings, maybe you do want to move towards something with an orchestra. Like if that does not interest you, then let's move on. Okay. We don't want to force you to listen to something if you don't enjoy it from a like actual enjoyment level, not just a sensitive, not just a symptom level. From there, we move up to lyrical. Now, same thing. In lyrical, there's different elements. Lyrical might be an acoustic lyrical. It might be pop. It might be ballady. It might be, if you listen to rap, right? So in lyrical, the tempo is going to matter. How fast someone's speaking is going to matter. And I usually say start with songs that you know. Because if it's a song that you know, you really don't have to process the words because you know it. Processing what's actually being said, like how many times have we all been like driving along and we're singing a song and we're belting these words at the top of our lungs and we are not comprehending in the least what we're actually saying. And then for some reason, someone like pops the lyrics in front of you. And so you're like reading them as you sing them and you go, holy shizza, that might not have been appropriate, right? Every single one, every human has done this. But lyrical would be the next level. And then the next level after that is conversation. And this could be a podcast. This could be engaged in conversation with other people, right? Those pieces of things. Ideally, you want to move yourself up through that pyramid. And we have many people who've done this and kind of worked at it and had success with it. You want to move yourself up through that pyramid with just being able to do the listening activity itself. And then you come back down to the bottom of the pyramid and you start to layer things in. So then you might have to do a task. You might layer in a secondary task that you also pay attention to, right? You might layer in having a conversation with someone else with sound in the background. And can you stay attentive to the person in front of you and comprehend what's being said? So what I've said to clients before, especially when they have a friend or a partner who is actively open to helping them with the rehab, is I'll say, okay, with this one, you're going to put some white noise on in the background if that's the level we're at. And you're going to have a short conversation, like 2 to 5 minutes. And then the person who's on the healing journey is going to summarize back to you what you just talked about with as much detail as they remember. And then you can help them. You can ask questions to help them come together. But that's a whole other level of rehab that you can do with the auditory system. Okay. So that is your sound sensitivity pyramid. And it's another way that you can start to retrain yourself to sound, to music, especially if you've been someone who has been trying to avoid it for a while. You can't go from 0 to nothing, right? We need to ease back into it. We actually had this really great conversation on the call yesterday too about exposure. Well, what they said I define as exposure therapy. So again, I'm not a psychologist. But the example was given of someone wanted to increase their sensitivity to sound and they wanted to improve their sensitivity to sound. And so it was suggested that they just go into the world, go into that space and do it. Okay, here's the problem. You just go into the space and it throws you into overwhelm and you cannot begin to have the tools to regulate that system, to bring that response down. That's going to do jack squat for helping you heal, in my opinion. So I used an example of wanting to be able to be back in a coffee shop again. And I use the example in Nanaimo. There's 2 coffee shops that I really love to work at. One of them, beautiful, big windows, sunshine is always coming in. It's always busy. So close quarters with other tables, lots of talking. It's big, tall ceilings. So there's a bit of the noise carries. The cappuccino machines or the espresso machines, whatever those things are actually called. You hear the grinding, they're loud. There's a lot happening. So cool. That's option A. Option B, it's a smaller coffee shop in town. It's owned by 2 lovely women. There's 4 tables and some stools. It's very quiet. It's warm. Not usually a ton of people stay in it. People come and go. Much quieter. Still hear the espresso machine in the background. You still hear a little bit of conversation, but much more calm. If I'm trying to get back into going to coffee shops, which one do you think would be the one to start at? Coffee shop B, right? You get to get A, into the environment of just being in a coffee shop. So that's a win and you get to celebrate the shit out of that. Then you still have the background noises of some people talking. You still have the espresso machine. So you're still getting exposed to that sound and that noise. But it's in a way that you could likely still relax and calm your system in that environment. Then if you chose to, you could take it the step up. So we have success there, and then you could step up to coffee shop A. Now, this did bring up another point in the conversation that I absolutely loved. And my occupational therapist listening to this may love me or hate me for saying this comment. You don't need to turn every aspect of your life into a rehab exercise. You don't. You are allowed to have things in your life if you're on this healing journey that you just get to enjoy. So let's go back to my coffee shops for a moment. If you go to coffee shop B and it feels good and you can relax and you can calm and you love it and you don't want to progress to coffee shop A, then don't. Let coffee shop B be an experience that you know fills your cup. Let coffee shop B be an experience that you know that you could engage with somebody else and enjoy it and have your heart full, which will have a positive impact on your nervous system to do something else later in the day. You don't need to turn every aspect of your life into a rehab opportunity. Please don't. You need to have the ability to just live. Okay, I bounced everywhere a little bit in this episode. Honestly, this kind of mimics the mini school call we did. So if you are listening to this and you haven't checked out the mini school replay this week, we get a lot deeper into things in there. Go check it out. But I hope you found this helpful. I hope you're excited for the summit as we release that next week. And until then, my friends, have a great day. That's today's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you liked what you heard, give us a like, give us a share, give us a tag on Instagram, and please never hesitate to reach out. We love communicating and connecting with you. Until next week, my friends, have a marvelous day.